What do you do when the substances that our young people are turning to evolve faster than the conversations we're having about them? Alison Armstrong has spent decades working on the front line of substance misuse prevention, and today she's helping people understand two of the fastest growing threats, vapes and spice. This episode is about awareness, action, and how to have the right conversation before it's too late. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast, where we dive into the real issues that matter to caregivers, educators, and anyone supporting others. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and in this episode, we're talking about two substances that become alarmingly common among young people. That's vapes and spice, and what we can all do to better understand and respond to the risks they bring. Joining me is Alison Armstrong, a powerhouse in the field of prevention, education, and community training, with decades of experiencing and delivering impactful workshops across the UK on everything from adolescent brain development to substance misuse awareness. Today, we're unpacking what people need to know about these emerging trends, how we talk to people about them, how to recognize the signs, and how to respond in ways that protect and empower. So first off, Alison, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And I know we've had a conversation in the past about this particular subject, and I'm fascinated to kind of get into it because I have to plead a little bit of ignorance on my side of things. It's not my expertise at all, but I have encountered quite a lot of places where things like this conversation is emerging and growing, and better understanding is definitely something we need, isn't it? How did you get into this understanding of these particular areas?
I think spice is interesting because it builds on our knowledge and understanding, I suppose, of cannabis. And cannabis we've been talking about for a long time. It's a real complex subject, become even more complicated with medical grade cannabis and the prescriptions of cannabis. So I think when we look at drug and alcohol, understanding everything it's like a building block. And if you understand one block, and then you understand another and you put the blocks on top of each other, it kind of all starts to make a lot of sense. Spice has become a bit of a catch-all term for what we call SCRAs, which are synthetic cannabinoid receptor agonists. It's a little bit of a mouthful. So we just call it spice.
Spice is much easier.
Yeah, we just call it spice. But spice is it's a bit like calling, all the crisps. You've got all the brand flavors of crisps, Walkers and Tayto and whatever, and then you call it all crisp. So it kind of works like that. But what it's doing is it's mimicking THC. So in order to understand spice, we have to understand cannabis.
Okay.
And then we have to understand a little bit about vape. And so we almost need to talk in those three separate pillars and then bring it all together.
Okay, well, you are the expert in this. So let's start off with, because we spoke a little bit about this, obviously the two main chemicals that most people associate with cannabis, THC, and then the other one, and it's escaping. CBD, that's it. I know CBD's become much more popular and awareness around that, and people taking CBD oil for a lot of medical purposes. But do you want to tell people a little bit more about those two?
So there's well over 300 compounds in a cannabis plant, and when we're talking about a cannabis plant, let's imagine this plant is growing in your own back garden. So it has a balance to it. It has THC, it has CBD, it's grown in your own back garden. It's a plant, it's going to have a synergy to it. And then we think of something that's made, we say made in a lab, almost like, made in a lab, but let's face it, in a lot of cases, they could be made in a kitchen, in someone's kitchen. So there's a difference between something that is naturally grown and then something that is synthetic and that is made in a kitchen. So let's say in the cannabis plant, there are well over 300 compounds. They do lots of different things. They work on what it smells like, what it looks like, a little bit like a rose. You can have lots of roses, different colors, different smells, different sizes. You can have mini ones, and cannabis is very similar to that. But the two main compounds are THC, tetrahydrocannabinoid, and CBD, cannabidiol. Now, when we think of the plant, it has a balance, and THC and CBD is usually very well balanced within that plant. However, synthetic cannabinoids, their job doesn't necessarily care about the balance. So CBD is believed to be part of the plant to protect two things, the heart and the head. So it protects from psychosis, and it protects the heart from beating too fast. Because cannabis is a depressant, it sits in the depressant category of drugs. Now, it's not a depressant as in it makes you depressed. It depresses the central nervous system, so it sits within that category. So CBD is very important. On its own, it isn't particularly that effective. And we could talk all day about how I think people are getting terribly ripped off by CBD products on our market. So CBD dog biscuits, CBD gummies for your children, CBD shampoo, really because the law states you can't have any more than 0.2% of THC in the product, pretty much is useless. And we rely on celebrity endorsements and people to sell this. And I just don't like seeing people when they're struggling to be ripped off, really. So that aside, CBD and THC, it creates this balance. A fully synthetic SERA, because we also have partial synthetics. I'll explain that in a minute. But a fully synthetic SERA has removed the CBD. So it only mimics THC. So the THC is the psychoactive part of the plant. The CBD is the part that stops the heart beating too fast and protects from psychosis. When we have very strong cannabis, otherwise known as skunk, it usually has very low CBD and very high THC. So skunk is the plant form of high THC, low CBD. Spice is a synthetic THC. Only if it's a fully synthetic, which means it's missing really important elements. It's missing the part that protects your head from psychosis, and also you're missing the part that protects your heart. So unlike cannabis, if somebody was sitting in front of you and they were smoking cannabis, they would be quite chilled, relaxed, their central nervous system has been depressed, so to speak. If somebody was in front of you smoking spice, it would look similar. It looks very similar to cannabis. They'd also be very relaxed, very slow. It does depress the central nervous system. However, they would complain of their heart palpitating. So we don't get that with cannabis, and it is believed that it's the CBD that protects your heart from that. So spice is really dangerous in that it's not protecting your heart. The other thing is that we have an internal endocannabinoid system in our body, and that's why cannabis kind of works quite well with the body's internal system. We have CB1 and CB2 receptors. And when somebody is using cannabis, it links to those CB1 and CB2 receptors, which can help with sort of immune or immunity, and also pain, nausea can kind of help with that. When somebody's taking a synthetic THC only, because it doesn't have the CBD, the problem with that is it actually increases pain receptors. And And what we're finding now is that historically, when people have used, for instance, heroin, if they come off heroin because they have increased their pain receptors, they have to replace that with a methadone or a Subutex. We're finding now people have to use methadone or Subutex coming off spice. So this is being sold as cannabis. It's been sold, as synthetic THC. It's really none of those things because it's made it's so removed and different from the plant. And, people who use cannabis, for whatever reason they use cannabis, probably would avoid spice at all costs because of just the nature of it and the way it's made. What we're finding, people who are moving over to use spice maybe from other drugs that they're unable to get at the minute. So we're in a world decline of heroin. The Taliban regime have kind of stepped in and stopped the growth of poppy fields. Therefore, we're on a bit of a decline. Afghanistan produced well over 90% of the world's heroin. Now that's not coming forward. People are moving to look at other alternatives, and they're finding that spice, because it's so potent, so strong. I mean, it's 2 to 100 times more potent than cannabis. So it's so strong. It's actually, in some cases, doing what heroin would have done, and yet it's been sold to children as cannabis. It's very scary.
It is. One of the things with cannabis has always been a promotional benefit that people within that world probably would have proposed, was that cannabis isn't particularly addictive. Obviously, it can be psychologically, people become reliant on it, but it's not addictive in the same way. So you're saying that spice is addictive in a similar way to heroin and those more, what we class as more severe drugs. Then that's a weird, I don't know whether that wording's quite right, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, when we think about dependency, addiction or dependency, we look at two elements. We look at physical and we look at psychological. And all drugs, you can become physical and psychologically dependent on them. But yes, there is a variance. So there's a hell of a difference between physical dependency on heroin or alcohol, benzodiazepines, methadone, as opposed to, say, for instance, nicotine or cannabis. So if I was a user of cannabis and I decided to stop, I would definitely feel the effects of that, but I wouldn't have to be hospitalized. If I stop smoking, I'm definitely going to feel that, but I don't have to be hospitalized. But if I was drinking alcohol, using heroin, you definitely need additional medical intervention and support. Yes, if somebody was using cannabis and they decided to stop, they'd feel it. I mean, of course, if you've been used, it depends on how much you use, how often, all of that, the quality of the drug, other lifestyle choices, whether you're male and female. I mean, there's lots of things depend on it, but you would feel it. Of course you would, but you wouldn't necessarily have to go to hospital for support. Spice is so different because of the heart palpitations. So you're at risk of a heart attack. Yeah. So, and it can happen very quickly.
Right. Okay.
Weeks, within weeks.
Yeah.
And also the effects don't last as long as cannabis. So if you were using cannabis, you might smoke and you might be okay for a few hours. You might still enjoy the experience of that. Spice comes in very quick, but it leaves pretty quick as well. Right. So they have to reuse a lot. So it can happen really, really quickly.
That's interesting. One of the things I've kind of come across related to spice, obviously you see these things on kind of TV and sort of videos where it's almost like a zombie type state. Is that spice and related to spice, or is that something else? Is that unrelated?
Well, it really depends on what people are calling it. And to be honest, Andrew, that will change location to location, country to country. I've heard slang terminology for one drug that wouldn't be used somewhere else, etc. So it really depends. Yes, they could be calling spice the zombie drug because it renders the person almost, very still or whatever. But it could also be a combination of benzodiazepines, which are crushed down and used as well. So it really depends on what dialect or... The thing is about spice, we've seen it before. So it's been around before. It was developed well over 20 years ago. Between 2009 to 2016, we've seen it, and it really took us by surprise. Because working in the drug and alcohol, I'll never forget. I was I was delivering training to some young people, and they were saying to me, "Are you finished? Hurry up. Are you finished?" And I said, yeah. And they left, and the member of staff said to me, "Oh, they're after that magic." And I remember going back into the office saying, "Has anybody ever heard of magic?" And they were like, "No." So talk about being blindsided for drugs. So it was known as meow, meow, magic, bath salts, incense. It had all these plant food. It had all these different plant food. It had all these different names. And then from like 2009 to like 2016, trying to get a grips of what this was really difficult. And it was like this whack-a-mole approach from the government, because they kept saying, okay, if it's a chemical composition of this, we're going to make that illegal. And they just changed it and called it something else. And then eventually in 2016, they were banned, and they were called new psychoactive substances, otherwise originally known as legal highs. But they weren't all highs, because there were legal lows and legal sideways and legal disassociates, and because they were mimicking the categories of drugs. And then they were called novel psychoactive substances, and then they didn't like that name. And then they finally settled on new psychoactive substances, and they were banned in 2016. There's nearly 200,000 of them. And they are mimicking illicit drugs, and they are really just chemicals, and they are mimicking illicit drugs. So we have seen spice before. It was part of that. And just like anything, when you make it illegal, it doesn't disappear. It just kind of goes underground. But it did seem to disappear. It did seem to not be as popular. We've seen a little bit of a resurgence of some of our other illicit drugs. Ecstasy, for instance, MDMA, ketamine, some of these drugs were kind of coming back again. It did kind of disappear. And then vaping. So when I talk about the building blocks, you look at the building blocks of cannabis and the complexities of that. You look at understand sort of SERAs, and then you have to bring in vaping, because vaping has changed everything. And I think it's a really interesting development in that. For instance, I'll give you a statistic. So in Northern Ireland, we have a young people's value and attitude survey. We follow young people over a long period of time. Gives us an awful lot of data. What we know is that 8%. Now, the last time the report came out was 2022. The new report will probably come out this year or next year, hopefully, and this is obviously going to be way higher. But in 2022, less than 8% of our young people between the ages of 11 and 16 smoked a cigarette or tried a cigarette, in comparison to 21% of our 11 to 16-year-olds who tried to vape. But that was 2022. I would say, anecdotally, when this new report comes out, that's going to be higher, for sure. So vaping is so interesting because it came out as a harm reduction for smoking and has now become the drug itself. And where are we, in trying to get a handle on this or try to understand this? We have got adults who are now doubling the amount of nicotine that they're putting into their body because they're vaping and not smoking. And they think it's a harm reduction and it's better than smoking, when actually they were maybe 10 a day, they're probably now 20 a day smoker. You see people who who only smoked 5 to 6, they're now on equivalent smoking 40. You'd be horrified if you worked out how much you were smoking. And that has been where spice has come back into the fore because of vaping, because you can't detect it. It's in a vape pen, it's vaporized. Can't really detect it in the same way. It's easy to move around. We have no idea what heat does to that drug. We have no idea what the heating element is doing to that drug, how it's breaking it down. And they are your fully synthetics because they have no CBD. And then you get your semi-synthetics, which have some CBD in it. And you think, oh, great, because Alison said CBD protects the heart and head. That's great. I'm glad a semi-synthetic has some CBD in it. Well, not really, because they just tweak the CBD.
Right, okay.
And they're sold quite often as gummies and sweets. And again, people are being ripped off, kind of like, and they really are targeting children.
Yeah.
Like it's just the colors of everything and the way it's marketed. It really is going towards children. Same as vaping.
Yeah, I was going to say, the thing they've changed the law on vaping now, haven't they? So you can't get the single-use ones in the same way as you did. Or they were trying to move
You have a couple of days. Let's say it's the 27th. It comes out on the 2nd of June, but you're absolutely right.
That's about to disappear into it, yeah.
So you've got another few days. I think they're selling them off sort of like 5 for £10 or something to get rid of them. But if we learned anything from NPS, making things illegal doesn't just make them disappear. Obviously, they're not going to be manufacturing them anymore, so that's going to make a difference. But they're still selling vapes. And when you think of cigarettes and how cigarettes, and I'm not advocating that people should be smoking over vaping. I'm not. Shouldn't be doing any of it, really, ideally. But if you think about, cigarettes, so we started off by changing everything to no branding. So it was all grey. And then we put the ugly pictures on, the horrific pictures. And then we put the price absolutely through the roof. Yeah. And then we locked them behind steel cabinet doors. Yeah. Now, research would tell us, not about the pictures and the brand, and there's no research to back that up, but research would tell us putting the price up, making them less accessible can have an impact, not necessarily on those who are currently smoking, but those maybe who were going to stop. Yeah. But then what did they do? Yeah. Oh, yes, lock the cigarettes behind the cabinet and then just open up this beautiful display of all these colors and all the, and it's like ice cream, isn't it? All the pinks and the blues, and then they've got flavors, and then they've got these beautiful names, and who was that attracting? Our children.
Yeah. I found, for me personally, I've been a smoker and I've been a vapor as well. I've been both. And I found quitting vaping harder than quitting smoking as well. I was so much more connected. I think smoking and vaping are so different in the fact that, a cigarette, you have one, it ends at some point. You go outside, you have one, you're done. Whereas the vape just didn't run out. You kept going. So you'd be standing there in conversation and just puff after puff after puff after puff. As you said, it's doubling the amount of what people are having. Yeah, definitely.
Andrew, I'm right here because I'm quitting at the minute. And I started smoking when I was like 14. So I'm constantly quitting and smoking and then quitting and smoking. So the last time I quit, which was in April last year, I quit smoking. I picked up a vape. I don't know why I did that. I hadn't done it before, but I picked up a vape. And so I moved. Even talking about it now is giving me, I can feel myself thinking about it. Oh my goodness, I'm only day 2. And you are absolutely right. This is horrific. Yeah. I did not feel like this when I quit smoking, and I can't think of it. It's all I'm thinking about. And I keep going for it. And you're right, because when you smoke, it has almost like a ceremony to it. You'll have one after dinner. Yeah. You might stand outside and have one, if you're talking to a friend or something. You're not taking it to bed with you. Whereas your vape's going to bed. Yeah. It's going to bed. It's sitting in the office. It's in your car.
Yeah.
So I have definitely gone, and I was only a 5-a-day smoker. I probably have titrated up to 15, 20 a day. I'm shocked, but it's happened. And only really through my understanding of it has given me the information and the knowledge to say, you got to get a grip of this, because this, you know about this now, you got to get a grip of it. So I've quit. But vaping has really complicated all drugs now, because if you can crush it, you can vape it. If you could crush it and get it into oil, you can vape it. There is evidence to suggest from service users that they pretty much are vaping anything if you can get it into a vape pen.
I know you mentioned something as far as last time we were chatting, as far as the way that any drug kind of sits in the oil. And I think that includes nicotine from maybe what you told me, that it's not then universally distributed or something like that. So you could find that you get a huge hit or on one vape and then it's not on another. Is that right?
That's correct. So it's called a hotspot. So one of the dangers is if I put something into liquid and I shook it, I would probably get an even distribution. But in oil, it doesn't work like that. So if we put some spice, which is basically chemicals, and we put them into oil, it could have a hotspot within it. So sharing pens can be dangerous. We could be sharing a pen. I could be fine and you might, not be. And that's because you've had a hotspot or a person who's using. So that is another potential danger of the oil. And again, the titration, because if you were measuring out your drug, if you were measuring it out like a gram or 2 grams, you would be measuring it out. You'd be planning your night or your day or whatever, and you would be using a set amount. When we put it into a vape, you're just constantly at it. So you're just maybe overdosing without realizing it or not giving it a chance to take effect so hotspots are dangerous.
Have you ever encountered an adult or child's behavior that has felt difficult, overwhelming, or challenging? Have you sometimes felt at a loss of what to do or know that you didn't handle it quite right? People are complex and unpredictable, and their behavior can be like the weather. We've all made the mistake of looking out the window and feeling safe to wear shorts, but 5 minutes later, wishing for an umbrella. What if, like a weatherman, you understood how humidity, temperature, and pressure all come together to cause the weather, allowing you to better prepare, predict, and respond, and prevent ever having a picnic ruined by a thunderstorm ever again? My book, called Targeting the Positive with Behaviors that Challenge, helps you to become the weatherman of behavior. It provides you with a toolkit to increase competency, confidence, resilience, and empathy, so you feel more assured about how to respond to distressed or dysregulated behaviors in others, including those affected by trauma, mental health, neurodiversity, learning disabilities, or dementia. Build better connections, achieve de-escalation, and improve outcomes for yourself and those you engage with my celebrated 6-stage target model, a step-by-step process to reduce distress for everyone. Discover my empowering, person-centered guide in Targeting the Positive, written by me, Andy Baker, available from online bookstores worldwide. Find a link in the description and order today. So obviously it always used to be smoking was never considered to be a gateway drug. Cannabis was always considered to be the kind of gateway drug, wasn't it? That nobody ever went, if a kid's smoking, they didn't necessarily then go on to do anything else. But cannabis, they always said, always slippery slope into other factors. Are they opening up now? Do you think now they've taken a step back, that vaping is much more of a gateway due to the fact that it is the same delivery method that then can be used for all sorts of different substances?
Yeah. I think they called cannabis the gateway drug because they wanted to demonize this drug, which, let's face it, if you were looking at the Misuse of Drugs Act, over 50 years old, completely out of date, doesn't make any sense. And cannabis is sitting in there as a Class B drug. Magic mushrooms that grow in the ground, which have very little risk to them at all, as a Class A. And then we have our pharmaceutical drugs, which you're more likely to be struggling with, which are prescribed, sitting in. So it just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, gateway drugs. I actually think alcohol's your gateway drug. And we mustn't forget that, Andrew, because of all the drugs, you put them all together. And it still doesn't do the damage that alcohol does.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't. If we were looking at all the issues in terms of criminality, if we were looking at accidents, if we were looking at related deaths, if we were looking at direct death, if we were looking at A&E admissions, antisocial behavior, policing, courts, the amount of money that goes into alcohol related issues is way surpasses what goes into drugs. And of course, nobody talks about alcohol because that isn't, why would you do that? Sure, it's legal and everybody does it. No, brings in all the reasons, the taxes and all that sort of stuff. So drugs just become a political football. They become a political hot potato. It's the kind of thing we can talk about. But yes, I think you're right. I think so the Icelandic model, which is now known as Planet Youth, about 15 years ago, they had a problem with alcohol and cannabis. And they stepped in to the Reykjavik University and said, what are we going to do about this? Please help us. What are we going to do? And they said, we'll help you. We'll help you. But your prevention strategy's got to be longer than 3 years. So you can have a prevention strategy, but it's got to be longer than 3 years. You can't have a political, loop or whatever of 3 years. They said, okay, we promise. And they said, it doesn't matter who's in power. You have to put the money in the pot. So everybody promised. They said, okay, let's do it. And they also said, and you've got to be patient. It's not going to be fixed in the next 5 years. It's going to take time. Give it 10. And they were like, okay, we promise. And they started what they called Planet Youth, the Icelandic model. And what they did is they did several things. So the first thing they did was questionnaire the children. So the questionnaires go out twice a year. They get turned around in 8 weeks. 8 weeks. The data comes back. So you can build your service accordingly. And they could really follow the children. So during COVID, we knew that anxiety had increased in girls because of, right in the middle of it, because of one of the questionnaires that had gone out in Iceland. And then they build a service accordingly. So for instance, we talk about evidence-based practice. We talk about evidence-informed practice. But on whose evidence are we doing this? It drives me scatty. I mean, we're talking about, oh no, our project follows evidence-based, who? Australia? I mean, we need our own and we need it quickly as well. There's no point in saying, in 2022, it was 4 years ago. So they do that. Then they put a lot of money into the prevention for after school activities. So children are very busy after school from the age of 4 or 5. Every parent gets, 5 years ago, it was €500. I don't know what it is now. It might be more. But they get that for each child per year to book them into after school activities. So that's good because it's expensive. And it means everyone's doing it. So it's not just whether you can afford to do it, everyone's doing it. So all these little 5 and 6 year olds are busy, very busy. And then they make sure that the after school activities volunteering, they removed it. They made sure that the after school activity met a certain set of standards. So they had to be the very best to work with the children. What they found after 5 years is that it started to decline, drug and alcohol. Now, 15 and 20 years, you can go and look at their statistics. I encourage you and anyone else who listens to this, Google right now, Icelandic children drinking alcohol in Iceland, and you will struggle to find a picture on the internet. And the kids don't know why. They do not know why they don't. They just don't. They used to have 17 treatment centers for drug and alcohol. They now have 1. Of course, when children are 15 and 16, they maybe do less after school, but that's okay. That's quite normal. They made alcohol very expensive. They put it into government-only places where you could buy it. You couldn't get it from a supermarket. They removed it from all sporting venues. Look at our alcohol. It's absolutely everywhere. And even though it is alcohol-free, it's now, it's in the garage and it's in the spot. Even places that don't have alcohol licenses, it's just sitting right there. And our children are just looking at it constantly, this alcohol. And then, so Iceland found within 5 years, they had a reduction. Within 10, they had this huge reduction. They now, they don't have the problems they used to have with alcohol and drugs. Our problem in the UK, not in all parts, because the Icelandic model has been put into parts of Scotland. It's been put into parts of the Republic of Ireland. I mean, it has to be a whole country approach.
Yeah.
So you really need the government. It needs to be a program for government to say, right, we're going to fix this. We're going to do it now. Because everybody wants it fixed today, don't they? They're like, oh, knife crime, fix it today. Drugs, fix it today. Antisocial behavior, fix it today. Well, it doesn't work like that.
No, it's a 4-year turnaround, isn't it? We've got to show that we've done something in 4 years, otherwise we'll get kicked out. So we don't look at the long-term strategies. We just want quick fixes.
Nobody cares. Yeah. We want the quick fix, and it's never going to work, and it is going to get worse. And what we know about drugs and alcohol now is we are on a bit of a decline around alcohol in the UK and the rest of the world. So less people drink today as they did 10 years ago. However, more people are dying from alcohol than they did 10 years ago. Because people tend to only get to services when they're in crisis. There's still so much stigma around drugs and alcohol. It's different from mental health and suicide. Because mental health and suicide, we've become more open to talking about that. Please reach out. Please reach out and get help. Whereas drugs are still very much seen as self-inflicting. Well, it's your own fault. It's not your fault that you went through a divorce or you lost your job and therefore you've had a mental health decline. But you're using alcohol and drugs and therefore it's your own fault. Yeah. So there's still so much stigma comes from it. And I think I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. Yeah, no, I think you're right, 100%. And I think it is, although you've got that slight difference with the view of alcohol or the drugs, I think a lot of the other drugs or drug addiction is just seen as something, or assumed to be something dirty and down, rather than potentially if you shift it over to self-medication. All the stuff you've been talking about there, I know, the Rat Park studies were one of the early
Alexander's Rat Park. Isn't it fabulous?
Amazing. There's that shift of how we thought drugs were, when the rats were choosing cocaine over food, we were like, oh, this is what addiction does. And then the Rat Park study shows, but if we can get our dopamine from our environment and our social and community and community and stuff. So it makes complete sense. The Icelandic model is so important, isn't it? And I think this is where, for parents and teachers and caregivers, as you rightly said, is looking at what's the need rather than this condemnation of just don't do that, it's bad. It's looking at, well, why would somebody choose to do something bad than something good? It must be because it's easier, more obvious, attractive and rewarding. So if you can make the good things like connection, community, availability of socializing, success in mastery of sports and things like that, much more accessible, then they'd go for that instead to get those dopamine
100%.
Yeah.
And why? And 100%. And I have 4 children. I had a set of twins. And it was expensive. If somebody wanted to do ballet, the answer was usually no. Yep. There was no way I could afford it for the 2 of them. And it was expensive. Horse riding, forget that. Yeah. The boots and because they changed their minds so quickly as well. But if there was some bit of help and support to allow them to try different things, what a difference that would have made. 100%. But the money doesn't come forward. We brought the Reykjavik government, ASSERT, the drug and alcohol service I used to work for, and public health agency, and they brought the Reykjavik government, the Reykjavik University over to talk about Planet Youth to the Northern Ireland government. And their response was, well, how are we going to pay for that? Where's the money coming from? Now, they're not wrong. We haven't got any money. So where is it coming from? Because you have to skim it off the top of everything. Bit off education, bit off policing, bit off health and everything. But what's the answer? Because we keep looking for money for treatment. If you look at it a bit like a river and you go for a walk and in the river is a baby. Now this baby can swim and the baby is happily swimming away, but you jump in and you take the baby out, dress it and do whatever. And And the next day you go for a walk and there's 6 babies in. So you jump in, you do all of that. Next day there's 60. So you got to get help. You're all in the river now. Imagine how much it would cost just to build a gate at the top of the river.
Yeah.
But we cannot sustain. We will never get this right. It won't happen in my lifetime. Probably my children's lifetime. We will continue to not get it right because we want the quick fix. We want the turnaround immediately. We will never have enough money to keep putting it in treatment because we will keep filling the spaces and then we have to create another one and filling the spaces and have to create another one. The prevention of all risk-taking behavior in young people has to start at a really young age because 5 and 6-year-olds want to go with their friends to do dance class and gymnastics and whatever. 16-year-olds don't. And you cannot compete with drugs. You can't compete. We used to have this thing that kids will come in, they'll do some sessions on drugs or whatever awareness, and then we'll take them go-karting. As if that was going to really make a difference. Of course, they turn up for the go-karting and then they'd be away again doing whatever you cannot compete because Dr. Poldrack talks about a thing called prediction error. And it's what the brain expects to what the brain actually receives. Now, if you went to the fridge and there was a cheese sandwich, and you expected a cheese sandwich for your lunch and there was a cheese sandwich, it's like, oh, cheese sandwich, fabulous. But what if you opened the fridge and £1 million fell out? And you were like, whoa. And your cheese sandwich started singing and dancing and Gordon Ramsay turned up and made you a cheese. I mean, it'd be like, wow. And you would just feel so good. It'd be so happy. Everything would be fabulous. So when you're an adolescent, prediction error starts very low in children, goes really high in adolescence, drops off again in adulthood. So that gap between what it expects to what it receives is huge. And the wider the gap, the more dopamine fills. And we know that's what the brain becomes addicted to is the dopamine within it. So, and this is the scary bit, because when we say to young people and adolescents, do you not realize you made a mistake? Do you not realize what you've done is really dangerous? Well, no, they don't, because they don't have a prefrontal cortex. It's going to take until they're 24 years old before it's even grown. So no, they come from a completely different part of their brain, pleasure and reward pathway. But that prediction error, which is very high in adolescence, means that the brain tricks the person into thinking it had a good time, even if it didn't. Because the wider the prediction error, the more dopamine. So let's say somebody, for instance, took a drug and they didn't have a great experience. Maybe they couldn't even remember half of the experience. But because they had never done it, the brain was trying to predict something. It didn't get it. It got something way bigger. That prediction error was wide. Dopamine floods in. And then that person believes that it was brilliant. I sat in front of a young person who couldn't remember their night. And when I asked them to scale it on a scale of 1 to 10, they gave it a 10. They said it must have been good if I couldn't remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think there's a narrative around that as well, though? It's almost a social construction to a certain degree, as well as maybe the biological marker almost reinforcing it. There is this narrative, isn't there, that passing out means you must have had a good night as well. Do you think there's an element of that combined in the two?
Absolutely. Not for me as an adult.
No.
Not for you as an adult. No. That's a nightmare.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But for an adolescent?
Yeah. It means that you've done it to the extreme. You've obviously sought out that novelty more than you thought.
Yeah. So, and it's the dopamine and that they become. So you cannot compete. No. The amount of dopamine that floods into the brain when you take drugs is copious. Yeah. Like we say sometimes we'll say, come on, don't do that. I'll take you for a walk. Or don't do that and we'll go on a holiday, or don't do that, I'll get you some new clothes or whatever. You can't compete. No. And that's why prevention is so important. Yeah. But prevention, Andrew, isn't sexy.
No.
Nobody's interested in funding an after-school club for young people to allow the parents to continue to work, something that's affordable. Sure, that doesn't win an election. That's not sexy. Surely it would be much better to, say, oh no, we're gonna fix drugs and we're gonna fix antisocial behavior, and because that's a little bit more. But really, if we want our children to be raised in environments which are healthy, and we have to support parents. Like supporting parents to raise their children is really where because there's power in the parents.
Yeah.
You gotta help them. You gotta support them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't win elections.
Well, it's the same thing. The thing is, I think I've spoken about it on podcasts before. There was some stuff that came through, reduction in knife crime, and they found that you've got either use a stop or search kind of approach, but the places that managed to actually reduce knife crime were the places that invested money into community projects, because people are less likely to carry a knife if they feel safe. So straight away is looking again at the need of why the behaviour is occurring, rather than just trying to eliminate the behaviour. But we're still very stuck in old, archaic ways of the way that you stop people doing bad things is to punish, rather than looking at exploring why are people doing bad things in the first place. I just want to circle round, obviously, we're, to cover on us bits around vaping and spice as well. What have you come across some of the common misconceptions that people have related to spice and vapes, especially around young people?
Okay, so if we were looking at vaping, one of the misconceptions is that it's harm reduction from smoking, that it's better than smoking. So we have to really figure that out. You have to see how much. Now, because there's so many carcinogenics in a cigarette, is vaping better than smoking? Well, you could probably argue that it is. However, it is the amount that people are vaping is now the problem, and therefore they're more likely to be putting more nicotine into their body. So one of the myths is that vaping is also that vaping around your children is better than smoking around your children. Well, you shouldn't be doing either around your children. So you're unlikely to smoke inside the house or the car, but people are vaping an awful lot, and children are taking in secondhand vape. We haven't got enough research out from that, but I think it's fair to say, we also, so that's vaping then aside. The other thing then is if we were looking at spice, so the misconception is that it's cannabis. Because it is called a synthetic cannabinoid receptor agonist, they usually call it synthetic cannabis or synthetic THC. So it is synthetic THC because it is mimicking THC. It is synthetic, but it is not synthetic cannabis. The clue is in the name, synthetic cannabinoid receptor agonist. It antagonizes the life out of your cannabinoid receptors, and it holds on and it doesn't let go. So one of the myths is that spice is cannabis and it's sold that way, and that isn't true. The other thing is Wedinos, WEDINOS, which can test your drugs, has found that well over 50% of pens which are being sold as THC, which would be expensive because it would be cannabis oil, one of our most expensive drugs, actually is spice, which is just that chemical composition, that MD, MB, 4EN, PINACA, 4EN, Penica. It's like literally just chemicals. So that is a bit of a misconception. Also, Wedinos has found, and I think it would be good to maybe just even end on this, but Wedinos has also found a lot of the pens that have spice also have nitrazine in them, and nitrazine will kill you. Nitrazine is synthetic opiate. So because of our reduction in heroin, they have now created a synthetic opiate, nitrazine. Nitrazine is very, 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 very strong. If you thought about like a cocodamol, for instance, for pain, let's just give that anecdotally, just a number, 1. And then you'd give, say, a tramadol, 10. Maybe cocodamol or dihydrocodeine, maybe give it a 50 or something. Give heroin 100. Give nitrazine 500. Like, it isn't messing about. Why is nitrazine in a spice pen? Why is nitrazine in a pen? This is really, really scary. And if you looked at overdose, so if you looked at a depressant overdose, the person would be maybe unconscious and unable to rouse. They might have depression in their breathing, so you wouldn't see that they were, breathing. So that would look like a depressant overdose or an opiate overdose. If somebody was a stimulant overdose, that would be quite different. The heart would be beating faster. There might be vomiting, seizures, shaking, etc. If you were looking at spice, what would it look like? Would it look like a depressant overdose, or would it look like a stimulant overdose?
You would expect it to be a depressant overdose, I'm take it. But you've got then the increased heart rate, so you've got a bit of a combination of the two, I suppose.
So it's a stimulant. It looks like a stimulant overdose because you'd have the increased heart rate. But if it has nitrazine in it, it'll look like depressant overdose. And actually, the recommendation now is to apply naloxone, which strips the opiate away from the brain. So they're basically saying to people, listen, just apply it, because if it has nitrazine in it, you're going to save a life. So why would they do that? Why would somebody, go for one drug and then have nitrazine in it? Like, what would, and that's because it's about quantity over quality. So it's whatever you can top it up with. But that's pretty scary that they're finding synthetic opiates in spice pens that are being sold as cannabis. So it's kind of having all these building blocks to understand vaping, understand cannabis, and then understand SCRAs, and then kind of putting them together to build this picture, so to speak.
Well, so as we draw to a close, I think there's a couple of things that I think could be really useful from you. One, if a parent, carer, caregiver, teacher, or anything like that has concerns about these, where can they potentially find out some more information, or what would your kind of recommended actions be for somebody if they have some concerns?
So obviously, there is any number of organizations that you can make referrals to. That's quite difficult. Actually, well over half of young people will not even turn up to a service because, it's difficult to engage. They don't have that part of the brain that says, I want to make change. And if we look at De Clementi's cycle of change, it starts with pre-contemplation, contemplation, action. And a lot of people are sitting in pre-contemplation. They don't connect the dots that that's a problem. So that's really, really difficult. What I would say is, if we were looking at unmet need as opposed to the drug itself, so what is the need that is being met, then there's more power in that. If you thought about anybody who was using drugs almost standing in the middle of a tug of rope, and you've got all the risk factors on one side. And that's where we tend to put a lot of our energy. So we want to remove them from their friends. We want to make sure the drug's taken away. We don't want them hanging around with certain people. We do risk assessments and risk management, and we're risk adverse, and we're all this. However, the evidence would say that we have very little impact on that side of the rope, that yeah, we can reduce harm, but actually our power is on the other side, which is protective factors. So what if we were looking at the drug as unmet need and try to build protective factors? So if they didn't feel good about themselves, maybe we could be working on self-esteem, self-efficacy, self-confidence. If they didn't have a lot of friends or they were lonely, maybe we could be building new connections on the other side. Building protective factors offsets risk factors. The drug itself then loses its importance because you're getting your needs met by other elements. So they're really tough, especially tough for parents when ultimately they just want the drug to disappear because you can see it in front of your very eyes. Everything just falls apart. It's really, really tough. What I would say to any parent is that you are a super protective factor. You get extra points. What I would also say is when a child or a young person or a family member enters in to drugs, they tend to go into almost like a chaos tornado. And the only reason any of us would go into a tornado would be for love. But when you do that, you're also in the tornado. So as difficult as it is, there's more power of you removing yourself from that tornado. Boundaries are very important. And that's really tough. It's really, really tough. But you cannot help anyone if you're struggling with your own mental health decline, lack of sleep, inability to work, mental, depression, anxiety. You're not helping anyone, least of all yourself. So it's really hard for parents. I would say referral to a service for help and support, try to find out what the unmet need is and to build on that, to educate yourself so you really understand it and to almost treat yourself like a worker. I do a lot of work with parents whose children are using drugs, a lot of parents. And we basically treat it like workforce development.
Yeah.
So you think of people who work in the field, go and study this for years. I mean, I have years of study under my belt. Basically, we take parents through the same sort of study. Overdose training, crisis intervention training, suicide intervention training, understanding drugs, emergency first aid. I can't even think of it all, but literally just the workforce. So they become their child's greatest resource. And knowledge is empowering. I used to say knowledge was power, but it's not. Knowledge is empowering. And when they feel empowered, they feel more able to handle what's going on. So I would say workforce development for parents. Get on courses, sit on webinars, join courses. Nothing to be ashamed of or embarrassed about. Go and learn. And the more you learn and understand, the more equipped you become in dealing with it. And get help and support. And join a support group and talk to other parents who are going through it. Because it really is one of the worst things to watch your child go through that. It really is horrific. So
yeah. And as you say, there's an unmet need in there that I know every parent or most parents are going to want to try and help their child with, but it's shifting that focus, isn't it? That is, it's not about you. It's not because you weren't good enough or anything like that. It's about helping them in this moment to overcome the things that they're finding challenging.
Yeah, it could be an internal factor. It could be an external factor. It could be self-medication for an underdiagnosed or something that's been misdiagnosed. Maybe experimenting and young, actually taking risks is normal for teenagers. They're built that way. We only lived to about 50. 25 was middle age. 15, you were in your prime. Thousands of years ago, a 15-year-old would have been considered in their prime. Why? Because you were hunting. And now we're living to over 100, 50s middle age, 25, you're an adult, and poor 15 and 16-year-olds are no longer in their prime, when in fact, it's the environment that's changed, and the brain doesn't know the difference. Our brains haven't changed in a million years. So I really feel for young people today, it's a really difficult environment out there, a lot of navigating to do. And for parents who are raising children in today's world, it is hard for sure. Yeah. Social media, lack of sleep, lack of connection to others, because they're connected more to devices, then it's tough.
Yeah.
Unmet need could be loads of different things, and getting to the bottom of what that is can really be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Alison. Where can people find out more about what you do and some of the services that you offer?
So I deliver training programs, and I can deliver bespoke training programs for organizations. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. Not fancy enough yet to have a website, Andrew, but I'm on LinkedIn. So any kind of inquiries or anything at all, I'm always about.
Perfect. Lovely. Thank you very much for your time today, Alison. It was really interesting to go on this journey. I say it's an area of all the stuff you were talking about related to overcoming. Fits in with models I teach for any behavior of looking at the unmet need and greater understanding it, but going into a bit more detail on some of the complexities of vaping and spice is really interesting. So thank you so much for your time. We will make sure we've got, we'll put your LinkedIn in the description and the show notes. So please, if you'd like to reach out to Alison, if you'd like to find out more information or to find out about her courses that she runs, then please reach out to her. But otherwise, anything that you found in this episode interesting, useful, or thought-provoking, please like and share with anybody you think that could benefit from this. But otherwise, thank you again, Alison, for coming on today.
My pleasure.
And thank you very much.